Imagine waking up in a world where the very foundations of global power are shifting beneath your feet, where the choices made by leaders in distant capitals reverberate in your daily life, and where alliances and rivalries from decades past are being rewritten before our eyes. Right now, the high-stakes competition between the G7 nations and China is not just a headline, it is a defining force that will determine the trajectory of the 21st century. The question at the heart of this drama: are we on the precipice of a new Cold War, or is there a way for these giants to manage their rivalry and coexist in an era of unprecedented interdependence? To make sense of today's tension, we need to rewind nearly half a century and trace the evolution of this global relationship. Picture the 1970s. Amid the fallout of the oil crisis and the Cold War divide, the world's most advanced democracies, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the United Kingdom, and the United States, came together to form the Group of Seven, or G7. Their goal was to foster economic stability, ensure mutual prosperity, and build a bulwark against the uncertainties of the era. At the same time, China, still reeling from the Cultural Revolution and decades of political and economic isolation, began a cautious process of opening up to the world under the leadership of Deng Xiaoping. The contrast could hardly be starker. On one side, mature democracies pooling their economic might. On the other, a vast nation taking its tentative first steps toward modernization. The end of the 20th century brought seismic changes. In 1978, China launched its reform and opening up policy, unleashing a torrent of economic dynamism. By the turn of the millennium, China was knocking at the door of the global economic order. The year 2001 was a watershed, China's accession to the World Trade Organization. Western leaders hoped this milestone would usher in a new era of cooperation and convergence. Billions of dollars flowed from Europe, North America, and Japan into Chinese factories and infrastructure. Global supply chains stretched across continents, delivering everything from smartphones to sneakers at previously unimaginable prices. For a time, it seemed as though economic integration could bridge even the deepest ideological divides. But as the 21st century unfolded, cracks appeared in this optimistic vision. China's meteoric economic rise was accompanied by a surge in national confidence and a new willingness to assert its interests on the world stage. Under President Xi Jinping, who took office in 2012, Beijing's foreign policy became more muscular. China began to claim vast swaths of the South China Sea, constructing artificial islands and deploying military assets. Its approach to Hong Kong grew increasingly interventionist, drawing international criticism, while the government's policies in regions like Xinjiang triggered widespread alarm over human rights abuses. These moves did not go unnoticed in the West. The optimism that once characterized G7-China relations gave way to wariness, then to outright suspicion. This dilemma is not just a matter for diplomats, it is an emotional, economic, and ethical tug-of-war. On one side, the lure of the Chinese market remains immense. For many companies, China accounts for a significant share of global sales and future growth potential. On the other side, there are mounting concerns about intellectual property theft, forced technology transfers, and unfair subsidies to Chinese firms. Wendy Cutler of the Asia Society Policy Institute frames it succinctly. The G7 needs concrete measures, not just statements, to address China's economic challenges. Let's look at the flashpoints fueling this rivalry. In recent months, tensions have reached new heights. China's foreign ministry has forcefully rejected G7 claims over issues ranging from Taiwan's status to the militarization of the South China Sea, as well as accusations of economic coercion and unfair competition. In July of 2025, the European Union launched an anti-subsidy investigation into Chinese electric vehicle imports, alleging that massive government support allowed Chinese firms to undercut European car makers. This is not a minor dispute. The stakes involve hundreds of thousands of jobs, the future of green technology, and Europe's industrial base. Across the Atlantic, a United States government report accused China of violating intellectual property rights on a vast scale, estimating that American companies lose billions of dollars annually to forced technology transfers and counterfeit goods. This is more than an economic issue. It strikes at the heart of innovation, entrepreneurship, and the global rules that underpin fair trade. The United States has responded with a raft of export controls on advanced semiconductors and artificial intelligence technologies, triggering a race for technological self-sufficiency. Yoon Sun of the Stimson Center points out, China's drive for technological self-reliance is no longer just economic, it's a matter of national security. The rivalry is not confined to boardrooms and trade agreements. Military friction is growing in the world's most volatile regions. In August of 2025, Australia joined the United States and the United Kingdom for large-scale naval exercises in the South China Sea, a move that Beijing condemned as a provocation. These waters are among the world's busiest shipping lanes, carrying trillions of dollars in annual trade. The risk of an accidental clash is ever present. Michael E. O'Hanlon of the Brookings Institution warns, each new naval deployment increases the risk of miscalculation and escalation. China is not standing still. This year, Beijing increased its official defense budget by more than 7%, reflecting a broader push to modernize its military. The People's Liberation Army has invested heavily in anti-ship missiles, cyber warfare capabilities, and advanced surveillance systems. Meanwhile, Taiwan, feeling the pressure of near-daily incursions by Chinese military aircraft, has boosted its own defense budget by 13%. The arms race in East Asia is accelerating, raising fears that the region could become the epicenter of the next major conflict. But the contest is not limited to hard power. The G7's own attempts to counter China's influence have faced their share of challenges. The much-publicized Global Infrastructure Partnership, launched as an answer to China's Belt and Road Initiative, set an ambitious target of mobilizing $600 billion over several years. Yet, as of September of this year, only $200 billion had been committed. Critics argue that the G7 lacks the unity and political will to translate lofty promises into concrete projects. Daniel Russell of the Asia Policy Institute cautions, only a coordinated G7 approach can truly deter China's assertive behavior in the Indo-Pacific. Trade disputes are also intensifying. The World Trade Organization now finds itself arbitrating a growing list of complaints between the European Union and China over alleged discriminatory practices. Meanwhile, the United States has imposed fresh tariffs on a range of Chinese goods, prompting tit-for-tat retaliation. The specter of a full-blown trade war looms, threatening to disrupt global supply chains and drive up prices for everything from smartphones to automobiles. As Julian Gewirtz of the Council on Foreign Relations notes, China's economic model, once hailed as an engine of growth, is facing increasing headwinds from both external pressure and internal challenges. The consequences of this competition are not abstract. They affect real people, real businesses, and real communities. Consider the case of European automakers, who face a deluge of low-cost Chinese electric vehicles. For workers in Germany's historic manufacturing heartlands, or Italy's industrial north, the influx of subsidized imports threatens livelihoods and upends decades-old business models. In North America, technology companies must navigate a labyrinth of export controls, supply chain audits, and shifting regulatory standards. In Asia, countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, and India are emerging as alternative manufacturing hubs, as multinationals seek to diversify away from China, a phenomenon some call the China Plus One strategy. But what does the future hold? Experts and scenario planners outline three broad possibilities. In the first, the world fractures into rival blocs. Trade barriers rise, cross-border investment slows, and cooperation on global challenges, like climate change or pandemic preparedness, becomes vanishingly rare. This new Cold War scenario would see the emergence of parallel technology systems, financial networks, and even internet ecosystems, with the G7 and China leading opposing camps. History offers sobering lessons. During the original Cold War, scientific cooperation stalled, innovation was often stifled by security concerns, and proxy conflicts erupted in regions from Southeast Asia to Central America. The second scenario is what analysts call managed competition. Here, both sides accept rivalry as a fact of life, but commit to managing it through dialogue, guardrails, and selective cooperation. For instance, despite fierce competition in artificial intelligence and green technology, the G7 and China might find common ground on setting global standards for data privacy or collaborating on pandemic response. The Paris Climate Agreement and the World Health Organization offer templates for how adversaries can cooperate on shared threats. Managed competition is not about friendship. It is about finding ways to coexist without letting disputes spiral out of control. The third, and perhaps most intriguing scenario, is the emergence of a truly multipolar world. In this vision, the G7, China, and other rising powers like India, Brazil, and the countries of Southeast Asia share influence and responsibility for global governance. No single country or bloc dominates. Instead, power is diffused, and coalitions form around specific issues. Teresa Fallon of the Center for Russia-Europe. Asia Studies warns that the growing alignment between China and Russia presents a unique challenge for the G7, potentially reshaping the balance of power in Eurasia and beyond. In a multipolar world, smaller countries could play a decisive role as swing states, leveraging their ties to both camps. Whichever scenario comes to pass, the stakes could not be higher. Not only are we talking about the future of global order, but the choices made in the next few years will determine everything from the cost of living to the pace of technological innovation. Trade wars and tariffs could make everyday products, from smartphones to electric vehicles, more expensive and harder to find. Disrupted supply chains might mean delays and shortages for critical goods, including medical supplies and high-tech components. For investors and entrepreneurs, volatility in global markets can translate into wild swings in stock prices, shifting fortunes overnight. So, what does all this mean for you, the informed viewer? First, it is crucial to recognize that these geopolitical shifts are not happening in a vacuum. They influence job markets, the availability and affordability of cutting-edge technology, and the success or failure of entire industries. For those working in technology, the battle over semiconductors, artificial intelligence, and data flows could determine which countries lead in tomorrow's digital economy. Export controls may open new opportunities in some sectors while closing doors in others. If you are a student or entrepreneur, the global race in clean energy, biotechnology, and advanced manufacturing could define the next generation of economic winners. Second, consumers need to be alert to the ripple effects of geopolitical friction. For example, rising tariffs or sanctions can quickly push up prices for consumer electronics, automobiles, and even basic goods like clothing. Supply chain disruptions can lead to shortages and delivery delays, while heightened scrutiny of foreign investment may change the landscape for real estate, education, and tourism. In a world where politics and economics are increasingly intertwined, staying informed is no longer optional. It is essential for making smart personal and financial decisions. But it is not all doom and gloom. Even amid rising tensions, there are glimmers of hope for a more stable, cooperative future. Behind closed doors, diplomats and officials from the G7 and China are quietly working to establish crisis communication channels, develop rules of the road for military encounters, and explore areas of mutual interest. According to well-placed insiders, back-channel talks between G7 advisors and Chinese officials have intensified since the summer, focusing on crisis protocols designed to reduce the risk of accidental escalation. While these efforts may lack the drama of public summits, they could prove to be the unsung heroes that keep the peace. What can ordinary citizens do? First, stay curious and informed. Understanding the underlying forces at play allows you to anticipate economic shifts, adapt your career plans, and identify investment opportunities before they become mainstream headlines. Second, support policies and leaders who prioritize dialogue and constructive engagement over confrontation. History shows that wars, cold or hot, rarely produce lasting winners. The best outcomes often arise from patience, compromise, and a willingness to see the world through the eyes of others. Finally, let's not forget the power of collective action. Civil society, consumers, and investors have a voice in shaping the global agenda. Campaigns for ethical sourcing, environmental responsibility, and digital privacy can nudge companies and governments toward better practices. The choices you make, from the products you buy to the information you share, have ripple effects that extend far beyond national borders. So, can the G7 and China avoid a new Cold War? The answer is not simple, but it is not hopeless either. Most experts agree that open conflict is not inevitable. The key lies in concrete, coordinated strategies, like those advocated by Wendy Cutler, and a shared willingness to engage in real, sustained dialogue. It will take courage, creativity, and an unflinching recognition of the stakes involved. As this great geopolitical chessboard continues to evolve, the next moves could determine whether the world slides into confrontation, learns to manage competition, or forges a new, more inclusive order. The outcome depends not just on governments and corporations, but on informed, engaged citizens like you. If you found this analysis useful, please hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives into global economics and technology, and let us know in the comments. What future do you predict for the G7 and China? Will rivalry give way to conflict, or can cooperation still win the day? Your perspective matters more than ever.